Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Ichigo awoke his true powers. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Quick update. What If Ichigo Awoke His True Powers will be finished soon, since we've nearly at the end of the story. So now, I need your help picking the next project for the channel. I'm currently deciding between these three fanfics. What if Gacha system in Modern Family World? What if Transmigrated in Bleach World? What if Transmigrated in One Piece and becoming a Marine? Please vote in the poll and let me know which story you'd like to see next. I'll take the top pick and start working on that series next. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 27, Also Wandered Got, Contingency Plans. Previously on Way of the Protector, war with Quincy was not going well for the opposing forces, but, thanks to many individual achievements, the Gotei 13 decided to fight and take back the Suriitai in one final push. Coming across Aizen Sasuke, Ichigo fought the man and forced him to use his Bankai, the special power nobody could ever prepare him for. Trapped the teen in a nightmare where he was just a young delusional teen, locked up in a psychiatric institute with everyone he knew and loved being twisted, broken versions of their real selves. Suffering through the ordeal, Ichigo, on the brink of insanity, did the unthinkable and managed to break the illusion. Now, shaken to the very core, but determined to end the war, he stands again. For just a moment, he turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to the world around him. No amount of thunderous noise could penetrate the blanket of peace he felt just by looking at the face of his beloved. There was nothing more important than to truly believe that the reality he was in was real. To believe in the realness of his rose on a battlefield that kept him from falling through the gates of oblivion. Like a drunkard in delirium, he raised his hand and gently reached for her face, afraid she might flicker out of existence as if she was just an illusion of a perfection, a perfect illusion. He leaned into her and placed his nose next to her nape. With his fingertips, he felt her warmth. With his nose, he felt her scent. Emotion he didn't recognize welled within his chest and hurt him softly, a thin ribbon squeezing his heart. He welcomed the pain, greeted it with open arms. It made him feel alive. Alive and real. Releasing a short breath, a small smile settled on his mouth. I really am back. He gave her a quick squeeze and a peck on her cheek. A moment later, he was back on his feet. Shaken to his very core, damaged from within but also determined. Haunting thoughts and crippling images had to wait until he was finished. You are way too stubborn. Kurosaki Ichigo. At the sound of a certain man's voice, he fought against a tremor in his hands and clasped the handle of his Zanpakuto. In one swift motion, he brought the sword in front of him and pointed its tip towards the owner of the voice. Ichigo was done taking things nice and slow. Careful approach was never his thing in the first place. Let me be clear on this, Aizen. I know what your sword hides from the world for you, and, once upon a time, it made me pity you. Now, I just don't give a damn. I had enough of you. He ignored the man's scoff and the following smirk and briefly closed his eyes. Zangetsu. I'm here, Ichigo. Ready when you are. When his eyes snapped open, Ichigo addressed his next words to the woman next to him. Yoruchi, I am going to go wild. He felt a slight touch on his shoulder and then a sound of a shuunpa signaled that Yoruchi understood and cleared the area before she would get caught up in the fire. Literally. A second later, tendrils of black flames erupted both from Ichigo's Zanpakuto and his body, creating an image of a blinding black sun. Tiny particles of a scorched ground began to slowly disintegrate under the force of heavy Ryuryoku wildly gushing out of him. You called these flames of the damned, right? He called out to Aizen, who was carefully watching him with squinted eyes. The thumb on his sword hand twitched. Before the involuntary movement ended, Ichigo managed to flash across the battlefield and land right in front of the former Gotei captain. It's time for you to taste their flavor. Angetsu no Ka. Despite moving almost as fast as Ichigo did, Aizen couldn't completely avoid getting touched by his black flames. Not when Ichigo let them explode from his body like a bomb that covered the whole battlefield with its blackness. Satisfied, the teen watched as Aizen's eyes widened and a spasm in one of his legs caused him to trip in the middle of his high-speed movement. That is my true Shinigami power, Aizen. Do you like it? Do you like what you see? Ichigo asked in a hard tone when he saw Aizen shake in obvious discomfort. The man was breathing heavily and pain was reflected in his eyes. Still, he slowly managed to get back on his feet. A chuckle escaped his lips. Ichigo narrowed his eyes. Your Shinigami powers. Kurosaki Ichigo? Ha, that is truly ironic. He was seconds away from unleashing more of his power, when an odd tone of Aizen's voice piqued his curiosity and got the better of him. What is? Aizen shuddered and nodded towards the black flame licking his torso. It's ironic that you would take flames of hell, born from Yawacha's imprisonment in hell's subdimension, as your Shinigami powers when, in truth, they are of Quincy origin. Ichigo blinked in surprise, but Aizen wasn't finished. It's ironic, because they were originally a holy power but, thanks to the Shinigami's tainted influence, they turned into something vile and poisoned the very father of Quincy. It's ironic, because it was supposed to kill him yet, in the end, it just made him that much stronger. When Ichigo didn't react, Aizen shot the final nail in the coffin. It's ironic, because you sound so proud when, in reality, it just turned you into a twisted, failed copy of the one you were fighting against. The man said, sounding almost triumphal. For a moment, silence fell between the two of them, broke only by Aizen's irregular breathing. Withdrawn from the world, Ichigo spoke to his Zanpakuto spirit. Zangetsu? I can hear your Quincy powers talking to me, Ichigo. He says he didn't know. He is a mirror image of Yawach from a long time ago, before he fell in the battle against the Soul King. Does it really matter though? Ichigo sent him a mental smile. Not really. I know who I am. Aizen's words can no longer reach me or disturb me. His Bankai was the last thing he will ever get me with. I just wanted to hear you after what seemed like years for me. And... Without warning, he tightened his grip on his Zanpakuto and slashed upwards. It gives me an element of surprise. Aizen without contingency plans is a predictable Aizen. Like in slow motion, the two halves of the former captain moved in different directions and fell on the dusty ground with a dull sound. Gah! Coughing blood, Aizen rolled over his upper half and glared at the teen. I see. You have changed even more than I thought, Kurosaki Ichigo. A bright light erupted from both halves of Aizen's body, causing the heavy bleeding to stop. Once that happened, thin ribbons of light began to look for each other in an attempt to try and reconstruct his body anew. It changes and nothing though. As I've told you many times before, I am immortal, Kurosaki Ichigo. You may chop me up, you may grind my body to dust, but you cannot kill me. Hogyoku will not allow it. Watching the man squirm and twitch in pain, Ichigo didn't react to his words. Seemingly deep in thoughts, he simply raised his sword and plunged it in Aizen's slowly reconstructing abdomen with enough force to completely pierce it through. When he felt the tip of the blade embedding itself into the ground, he squeezed the hilt until his knuckles turned white. Aizen gasped and more blood spurted from his mouth. Ichigo gritted his teeth and resolutely closed his eyes. Then he spoke. You are putting way too much faith in the Hogyoku, Aizen. Way too much faith in its indestructibility. Yes, for now, I can't break it. But I'm no longer an uneducated teen fumbling in the darkness. I know what the Hogyoku is and what it represents. He felt Aizen's breathing for just a split second. I see. I see. So, just like Urahara Kisuke, you've seen it. You've seen the Soul King. The relic that dash. I met him and talked to him. Ichigo interrupted the man and looked him straight in the eyes. For the first time ever, he saw Aizen speechless, unable to react in any way. He just stared at Ichigo with completely blank expression, seemingly unable to process Teen's words. You won't be immortal forever, Aizen, and, until that moment comes, I am content with simply keeping you down, here with me, restrained and unable to participate in this war in any way. Aizen finally seemed to recover from his shock and his face twisted into a grimace. Spitting blood, he raised his hands and gripped the blade of Ichigo's Zanpakuto that was still keeping him pinned to the ground. Kurosaki Ichigo. Ichigo just shook his head and kept his grip on the hilt. You will not get out of here, Aizen. Anjetsu no Ka. Calmly reciting the name of his ability, Ichigo smoothly raised his Ryatsu output and poured a large amount of Ryuryoku into his Zanpakuto, causing it to light up with black flames, forcing a scream to escape from Aizen's mouth. He didn't try to restrain his power and hit the man with as much punishment as he could muster in stomach. Even then, his flames were unable to burn Aizen's powerful body. The man's scream was caused by something else. Something he could see only. A dream. A nightmare. A perfect illusion he could not escape from. At that moment, Ichigo heard another voice coming at him from the right side. Very interesting, Kurosaki Ichigo. I approve of your choice of restraints. For now, though, I will take over the traitor. As much as I hate to play the role of a meager carrier, a message came from the Zero Division and it is addressed to your ears only. Tattered and slightly limping, a captain of the 12th Division slowly walked up to him, showing him a unique hell butterfly in his open hand. Ignoring the teen's surprise as well as Aizen's screams, he pushed it in Ichigo's free hand and then disinterestedly turned his head towards his new test subject. Receiving an even bigger shock, Ichigo heard the message playing in his mind. A message that was told in the voice of Soul King himself. Kurosaki Ichigo, listen very closely and carefully. This message will play only once and then it will self-destruct. It is imperative that none other person will know of its contents or else everything will be lost. You are the only one immune, the only one who can hear this. Therefore, listen. There is a way to defeat Yhwach and, at the same time, ensure the survival of this carefully balanced reality. He is coming. Above Siriiti. High above the borders of Shikanmaku, where nothing but the sky existed, a black blob of tangible energy continued to fall at incredible pace. Pushed and blasted from the Soul Society's most sacred place, the blob contained the main reason behind the current war, the head of the Wandenrake and the king of Quincy. Yhwach. Soon, the blob crashed into the Erasure barrier with a force it should not have possessed and tore through it with barely any resistance. Yet neither broke apart. The small hole in the barrier repaired itself slower than usual, but it still held and the blob continued in its fall. It took only seconds before its journey ended in a form of a crash landing in the middle of Siriiti. The area of the landing site seemed to be abandoned, devoid of any presence. Ever so slowly, the blackness of the blob receded and vanished into thin air, leaving its passengers free of its oppressive boundaries. The largest passenger, a man with long black hair and a mustache that was neither thick nor thin, opened his eyes. A bored expression formed on his face. What now, Your Majesty? The man, Yhwach, reacted to the question with a slight movement of his head. Now, Hashwolf? Now, we walk. He said and took a step forward. His words held no answer, but his white-haired aide accepted it immediately. Bowing down, he followed his king without hesitation. The word of God was absolute. They both managed to take only that one step before a fiery figure landed not far but also not close to them. There were waves of hot Ryatsu pouring out the person. His energy was so heavy, so scorching, the land around him seemed to be on fire. Yet the god didn't care, for his kingdom was slowly coming. Genryusai Shigakuni Yamamoto. The captain commander of the Gotei 13. I thought your long life had taught you a lesson on being a fool. The strongest Shinigami that had been born in the past 1,000 years looked at him with pure contempt. The only one being a fool is you, Yhwach. He said and raised his sword, causing Yhwach to laugh. What are you going to do, Shigakuni Yamamoto? Challenge me with your useless stick. You are but a Shinigami. Without your Zanpakuto, you are to me what everyone else is, an ant to be squashed. Yamamoto narrowed his eyes. Do not underestimate Shinigami, Yhwach, because that will be your downfall. Ryujin Jaka is just an outlet for my power, he said while releasing waves of blazing Ryatsu. Unfortunately for him, it didn't impress the leader of Quincy. What is a bit of Ryatsu to a god? Yamamoto vanished from his position and reappeared right in front of Yawatch with his sword moving sideways. The father of all Quincy allowed himself a mocking smile. Just when he was about to get hit, the steel of Yamamoto's sword met the steel of a thin sword held by Yawatch's aide. The resulting clash vibrated the air with a subdued sound. Out of the way, small fry. The captain commander growled and pushed harder. Hashwalth's sword moved, but he managed to keep his cool. Should I dispose of him, your majesty? Yawatch formed a malicious grin. If you can, Hashwalth, but make it as humiliating as possible. Nodding to his king, Hashwalth pushed back. Arrogant. Far too arrogant, Yawatch. Yamamoto grunted, visibly annoyed. Yawatch didn't respond. How could a god be arrogant when arrogance itself was a property of lesser beings? Lesser beings to whom Shinigami belonged to. Just like Yamamoto, the captain commander of Gotei 13. His arrogance was questioning the arrogance of others. In it, he became arrogant. He became ignorant. Ignorance was a bliss, but he was denied of even that. With horror written in his eyes, Yamamoto watched as Hashwalth's sword cut through the blade of his spiritless Zanpakuto and broke it to 2 pieces, instantly turning it into useless pieces of steel. However, being who he was, Yamamoto recovered and immediately let go of the hilt. Putting his anger into his fists, he strained his muscles and shot both his arms straight at Hashwalth's torso. Sakatsu. His fists dug into his target and Yawatch's second in command was sent skidding backwards. However, instead of turning into dust, like Yamamoto expected him to, he just coughed up a bit of blood. The powerful attack ripped his clothes and a web-like pattern became visible on his skin. Yawatch raised one eyebrow. In return, Hashwalth sent him an apologetic nod. I will immediately adjust the strength of the blood, your majesty. Ignoring their exchange, Yamamoto's brow twitched in fury. He refused to believe he truly became so weak that he couldn't defeat a simple subordinate like Hashwalth. Readying his stance, he shot towards the white-haired Quincy once more, but his eyes widened when a fist embedded itself into his gut and instantly stopped him in his tracks. Very good, Hashwalth. Now, Shigakuni Yamamoto, after your precious Sanjutsu and Akuta, what else is there in you? The fist in his gut was quickly replaced with a blade of a thin sword. Yamamoto hatefully looked at Yawatch and a tiny river of blood poured out of his mouth. Then he growled. Completely disregarding the steel piercing his abdomen, his right hand shot out and squeezed Hashwalth's throat, taking the Quincy by surprise. I'll tell you what else is in me. Determination. If I have to go down, I'll be taking you with me. After a quick incantation, his hand turned black and a single crack appeared in it. Fully powered Heido number 96. Ito Keiso. Not even you can escape unscathed. A massive pillar of red fire erupted from the ground in the shape of a katana's tip, completely swallowing all 3 of them in a cataclysmic explosion that instantaneously obliterated a good portion of Siriidii. Within the epicenter of the blast, the god just laughed. His word was absolute. The captain commander of the Gotei 13 was dying a humiliating death after failing to realize his one little mistake. It was his second time using the same sacrificing Kido. The god knew and, therefore, the god was prepared. Therefore, the god squashed the stubborn ant and continued to walk. At the edges of a large crater, the remnant of Yamamoto's last attack, the god briefly stopped walking. Fool to the very end, Shigakuni Yamamoto. He did not regret his actions. He did not pity the squashed ant. This was just him giving a last nod to the enemy that had fingers in delaying his plans for almost a millennium. Not worthy his respect, yet worthy of dealing with personally. Thus, God walked again. His steps echoed across the noisy Siriidii like a thunder, yet nobody dared to cross his path. He was the god, too frightening for heathens. And so, the god continued to walk through the non-heaven, the artificial nightmare for poor souls, undeterred and uninterrupted. But he was a god and so he knew he couldn't walk forever. His presence was a stain in the eyes of pagans. Not even being a god would keep them from approaching him. Eventually, the strongest of the remaining fake gods of death would confront him. Eventually, they would learn that being a god was different from being the god. Eventually, they would be punished and banished. Eventually, this fake kingdom built on lies, deception, and betrayal would fall. Nobody could stop it. Not even his son, born in darkness. The god ceased walking. From the darkness of his shadow, a blade, followed by an arm, shot up and tickled a single strand of his mustache. In the last fraction of a second, Hashwalth's sword prevented it from reaching any further. Immediately, a whole person stepped out of the shadow and stared straight at Yawatch. I honestly did not think you could react to it, Quincy. Shunsui Kairaku, the captain of the 8th Division. Hashwalth recited calmly, forcing the man in flowery kimono to take a casual step back. I apologize, but I thought being polite would only be rude. Not to mention my lady was getting impatient. Kairaku said while giving his Zanpakuto a warm smile. But then, in a matter of a second, his expression changed into a bone-chilling grimace with a smile so wide, it seemed impossible. But now she's all warmed up. Iruni! White! He exclaimed right after throwing away his flowery kimono. Before his prized piece of clothing hit the ground, his sword was already falling down on Hashwalth. Clad fully in white, Hashwalth hastily brought his own sword up and managed to block the strike. Yet the power behind it folded his arm like a twig and Kairaku's blade slashed him across the torso. Blood spurted from his body, making him stare at it in shock. Now, don't act so surprised, Quincy. You have data on our abilities, so you should have known you were supposed to evade that. Only then Kairaku noticed the web-like pattern on Hashwalth's skin. Yes, not even your special defense can protect you. My Zanpakuto doesn't abide by usual laws of Ryatsu against Ryatsu, Ryuryoku against Ryuryoku. Once you are in its grasp, you cannot cheat. He explained and then vanished, only to reappear behind Hashwalth while already spinning around. White. Freund Schild. Kairaku's Zanpakuto dug deep into Hashwalth's back, almost revealing the white of the man's spine, when a hefty and bulky shield materialized on Yawatch's aide's left arm. The captain of the 8th Division carefully watched the accessory. Interesting choice of defense. Maybe you should have turned around before creating it, though. Kairaku remarked quietly, only to feel intense pain in his own back. He saw and felt his blood leaving his body. Pushed a step backward, he lowered his torso and glanced up at Hashwalth. The Quincy, while still bleeding from his wound on his chest, seemed fine otherwise. Kairaku quickly realized that the wound he had given the man disappeared. Despite the situation, he managed a grin. I see, so you have a cheat that doesn't count as a cheat? That's just cruel cheating, Quincy. Hashwalth glanced at the motionless Yawatch that had been watching their fight and then opened his mouth. No cheating, Captain. You were just unlucky that you were lucky enough to wound me. Kairaku's grin widened. Ah, finally an opponent as cryptic and full of secrets as I deserve. I assume your shield is responsible for transferring the wound I gave you back to me? Hashwalth ran his hand across the gash across his chest and twitched in pain. You assume correctly. Like all Sternritters, I possess a script as well. Mine is B, as in balance. Waiting in silence for a few more seconds, Kairaku sighed. I suppose that's the extent of information you are going to give me, huh, Quincy? Seeing as you have more information on us, I would like to say that is not fair, but we both know there is nothing fair in a war. Am I right? Hashwalth didn't respond immediately. Instead, he first observed Kairaku's face. Truly, nothing is fair. Just like deception. Just like killing the leader of the opposing military. I must say I'm surprised, Captain. I thought you would be more upset at the death of your mentor, Genryosai Yamamoto. For the first time during their fight, Kairaku's face betrayed his emotions as his eyes darkened and his grin dried a little. Yamaji knew his final day was coming and that he may not survive the second war with Quincy. Before coming here, I spent a few last moments as his pupil and made peace with his death. Now, I am the captain of the Gotei 13. He stated in deep voice and raised his Ryatsu to match his words. Jumping into the air, he brought his blade down on Hashwolf once more. Ta-Kaoni. The white-haired Quincy didn't even attempt to shield himself and let Kayaraku slash his shoulder. An instant later, Kayaraku's shoulder erupted in a fountain of blood. I already told you, Captain, cutting me up won't change a thing. Are you sure? Hashwolf's eyes widened when he heard Kayaraku's voice coming from behind him while Kayaraku in front of him dispersed into thin air. Moving fast, he spun around, only to see Kayaraku watching him with narrowed eyes. I see. I wondered, how does that shield of yours work, Quincy? How does it know to whom it should transfer your wounds? Is it based on my Ryatsu or is it based on your senses perception, like, for example, vision? Kayaraku asked. His shoulder was intact. Hashwolf squinted his eyes at him. Does it really matter? We are still at impasse. You are still unable to win this fight. None of the injuries you can give me will stay on my body. Kayaraku renewed his grin and just sunk into his shadow. In his place, a dozen of his clones jumped from the shadows on the battlefield and each swung their blade on the Quincy. Unable to block or parry every single blade, Hashwolf received numerous cuts, some shallow but some deeper. He was already raising his sword when each clone dispersed into thin air, leaving no copy or any trace of Kayaraku on the scene. His legs shook under the burden of all the injuries and pain. Ha, very clever trick, Captain, very clever. But not clever enough. He muttered, and a bright light enveloped his body. As if in response to that, Kayaraku fell down from a nearby shadow. Immediately, Hashwolf raised his shield and transferred all his injuries onto him. But Kayaraku dispersed into air once more. Another clone, Captain? The real Kayaraku slowly crawled out of a different shadow with an unreadable expression plastered across his face. Can't be too careful, Quincy. What was it that you did? It almost forced me out of my hiding place. I only managed to swap places with my clone in the last moment. Hashwolf lowered his shield. I already told you my script, Captain. Balance. Kayaraku stared at him for a full minute, before a sigh crawled out of his throat and he lazily sat down. Making himself comfortable on the ground, he calmly placed his hands on his knees and took a deep breath. It was almost as if he thought of the battlefield like his new home. But he didn't. You are giving me no choice, Quincy. I cannot best you, but I also cannot let you through. Neither of you can go any further if I want to avoid any more bloodshed. He said. Hashwolf remained careful. So, what now? Kayaraku just lowered his face. Now, Quincy? Now it's time for a tragedy. His Ryatsu rose even higher. Bankai, Kaiten Kayakatsu, Karamatsu Shinju. The god wanted to walk again. But he could wait. There was no hurry. He could delay his plans for a little while longer. Because he was the god. Hashwolf was paying every bit of his attention to the man in front of him. He was not afraid. With Yawatch at his side as his general, there was nothing that could scare him. But he was witnessing a rare occurrence and he could not afford being careless. They had quite an extensive information on the main members of Gotai 13 as the long years spent on gathering intelligence had proved very fruitful. However, even then, they had been unable to ascertain what the Bankai of 8th Division captain actually was and did. They had been unable to find even its name. It seemed Kayaraku Shunsui had never actually used it in real fight or in public. He never had to. Even when he had become a captain, it had been on personal recommendation of the captain commander, and so no display of his Zanpakuto power had been needed. But he used it now, against him. Hashwolf had enough personal integrity to admit he might have felt just a bit honored. However, the feeling lasted only until he felt an eerie atmosphere slowly forming around the man, washing over the surroundings with its bleak and suffocating Ryatsu like a wave of a dusty wind. Even the sunlight gradually became dimmer and dimmer until the day turned into a night, where everything became a living shadow, a potential death trap. Feeling a tad gloomy, melancholic even, Quincy? Is it a bit too dark for you? Kayaraku asked while tiredly rising from the ground. Hashwolf opted for no response. I see. Do not worry, though. Despair will come soon enough. First act, Tamaraikizu no Wakachiai. The captain chanted and glided through the shadows with both swords at the ready. Hashwalth was unsure of himself for a moment and parried the first few strikes, but when nothing seemed to be happening, he lowered his sword and let Kayaraku's Zanpakuto cut his body several times. Clearing his mind through the pain, he quickly transferred his wound to the captain. Kayaraku staggered a bit when blood oozed from his body. Once it soaked his clothes with its red color, however, he coughed and formed a low smile. Pain attacked Hashwalth from every direction as the wounds he just transferred came back to him and tore into his body like hot claws of iron. What is this? He mumbled through gritted teeth. Quincy, do you know the story of a man that betrays his partner and turns on him? A man that brings upon his partner pain, agony, only to receive the same? A man who, in doing so, is unable to die from those wounds and is forced to suffer eternally? Hashwalth raised his head only to see Kayaraku speaking again. Second act, Zanki no Shirtone. If the pain he had been feeling until that moment was agonizing, it was nothing compared to what came next. Trying to stop himself from crying out, he saw black spots appearing all over his body, bringing even more pain than before. The story continued. Kayaraku said in a sad tone. The man, shamed by the wounds that were inflicted upon him, overcome with that shame, lays himself down, cowering in bed, and is stricken with an incurable disease. Rapidly blinking away the darkness, Hashwalth's body glowed in a bright light, but his condition did not change. He was quickly getting weaker and the pain was making it difficult to even breathe. I am afraid even your script won't help you, Quincy. You and the whole area around us is now under influence and control of Kaiten Kayakatsu. Trying to cheat your way out would be like trying to lift a wave of water with your bare hands. Hashwalth fought against the pain and sent a hateful glare at the captain. Pushing himself, he raised his sword and slowly walked towards Kayaraku, only to stop when he saw him shaking his head. It is futile. Kaiten Kayakatsu's laws are absolute. Third act, Danjio no Fuchi. It came out of nowhere. A massive amount of water engulfed everyone and everything within the borders of Kayaraku's Bankai like an endless abyss hungry for darkness. Though the water wasn't weighing on him with its wetness, Hashwalth felt his body slowly getting unresponsive, as if he was standing amidst the deepest crevice of a foreign ocean. Like a seafood getting crushed by ocean's incredible pressure. Kayaraku continued his story. Their actions dawning upon them, the two men cast their bodies into the water gushing forth, until both their ryatsu completely expire. The captain said while breathing heavily. He was clearly trying to resist the water's pressure just like Hashwalth was. Realizing that small tidbit of information, Hashwalth gathered every bit of strength he could muster and tried to fight against the tint of helplessness that was swirling around him, invisible yet palpable. Moving like a martyr nailed to a cross, the Quincy Grandmaster advanced with the speed of a snail, leaving a red trail of blood behind his broken body. He was Yawach's aide, the left hand of the god. Losing was not an option. Even if his body would get mangled beyond recognition, he could and would fight. There was no other way. Because, being the second half of Yawach, he felt honor. Because, being the god's half, he felt compelled to defeat his enemies, were they believers or simple heathens. If it was another time, I would congratulate you, Quincy. Your determination while facing Karamatsu Shinju is incredible. However, Kaiten Kayakatsu's compassion is that of a woman and a woman's compassion can be cruel. Kayaraku said as he watched Hashwalth trying to move towards him. Slowly pulling his hands away from his Zanpakuto, he grabbed a thin thread of white energy that was coming from his sword's hilt. No longer leaving an ear open to the man she adores, now, around her throat shines but a damp, white thread of her lingering affection. He raised the hand in which he held the thin white energy and gave Hashwalth a fixed stare. With every bit of remaining adoration, I'll cast it off with my very hands. This unsightly, entangled, thread of passion. Entering the scene, I present you with the grand finale of Lover's Suicide. Final act, Ito Kirebasami Kaizon no Nadabu. Giving no room nor time to evade him, Kayaraku flashed along the Quincy Grandmaster and winded the white thread around the man's throat. With a final slash, he pulled it. Hashwalth's eyes bulged out of his skull. A foreign energy entered a cut on his throat and expanded it grotesquely. One last thought ran through his mind. His head exploded. Watching the scene unfold, the god felt a familiar energy returning back to his soul. He could feel everything. Emotions swelled up within him. He recognized many of them and welcomed them. Welcome home. Then he sent them to a trap, into a tiny chest with an unbreakable seal, from which they couldn't escape so that he never had to encounter them again. It was his final nod to the man that had served him for a long time. Once he was done with that, he looked at a tired-looking captain. The man was returning his gaze without flinching. A heathen. Well done, Shunsui Kairaku. I applaud your accomplishment, however, that's as far as you can go. The captain licked his lips and then tightened his jaw. Yes, it seems so. I was trying to apply my abilities on you the whole time as well, but it seems like your aide managed to use some of his power after all. He pulled back everything I threw at you back to him, forcing him to suffer twice as much as he had to. That is some amazing loyalty, he stated. The god grinned. I expected nothing less from him. He shall live in me for all eternity. Careful, Yawatch. Eternity is a long time. You won't be getting that much of it. The god laughed. Who is going to stop me? You? Can you use your Bankai one more time? Do you think it will affect me? That I needed Hashwaltha's protection? Look at you, Captain. You are barely standing. Kairaku managed to form a hard glare, but it got quickly replaced with a tired smile. Lowering his arms, he let go of the last bit of strength he had within his body and let his body fall backwards. Heh, I guess you are right. But before his body could hit the ground, a pair of hands appeared behind him and caught him. Rest now, you did enough. Hearing the sound of multiple Shuunpa, Kairaku allowed himself to take a breath. Yes, I guess I did, huh? In a different part of Suraitii, Ichigo nervously paced around. It has been a few minutes since the oppressive aura receded from the area and he could think clearly yet again. Occasionally, he glanced to a distant location from where he could still feel a lingering presence of his own Ryuryoku, and his hands formed fists. Then it happened. I was wondering where they hid you, Kurosaki Ichigo, my son born in darkness. Ichigo turned towards the person that appeared in front of him. There, unharmed, stood the leader of the enemy, Yawatch. The person whom he had to fight against. A god. But what was a god to a non-believer? Chapter 28, Deicide, Death of the False God. He knew he would eventually come, whether it was for this or that reason. He knew he would come and overwhelm him with his presence. That he could may even knock him to his knees, cause a ringing in his ears or force him out of breath. It was to be expected. Yawatch was, for all intents and purposes, quite literally a god. However, facing the man himself, being in his immediate vicinity, Ichigo was unprepared for the reaction of his own self. Once he saw the man appearing in front of him, every fiber in his body screamed at him. Alarms rang within his mind and poured a loud buzzing in his ears. His Zanpakuto spirit was silent, yet there were voices trying to talk to him, trying to reach him. He couldn't understand any of them. To him, every word sounded like gibberish, like a distorted screech of an electronic tool, chilling him to the very bones. Cold grew within him, entered his limbs, leaked in his veins and made him feel as if his skin was under barrage of chilly pins and needles. Like a poison of a soul, it spread from his body to his mind, finally reaching his conscious thoughts and compelling him to move. Towards the god, towards his fate. I was wondering where they hid you, Kurosaki Ichigo, my son born in darkness. For the moment, Ichigo knew he couldn't rely on his emotions. They were too wild, too raw for him to handle. He couldn't listen to Yawatch. Whatever the man said and would say, Ichigo had to let the words just pass through him so they wouldn't linger for too long and affect him. Many were relying on him. I wasn't hiding, just waiting for you to come to me. I knew you wouldn't pass up the opportunity to try and break my resolve. Yawatch laughed. Indeed, Ichigo. It was our fate to meet face to face, right here and right now. I know, I've seen it in my future. You are not the only one. Ichigo thought to himself. Interesting. Aizen always claimed he had plans for everything. You, on the other hand, claim you can see the future. It seems I can't catch a break and face a simple maniac, he said, carefully eyeing his surroundings. Yawatch opened his arms, almost as if waiting for a hug. You misunderstand, Ichigo. I cannot see the future. I only see the future of one person. Myself. And I just happen to be in your vision? Yawatch lowered his arms and the laughter in his face died down. I was not just trying to be dramatic when I called you my son born in darkness, Ichigo, because you literally are in darkness to me. I can see every potential future of my being, yet every future where you appear simply ceases to exist. There are many possibilities for that. One of those is that you join me and remain at my side forever. He stated and took a step forward, towards Ichigo. Almost on reflex, Ichigo's legs twitched and he slightly switched his stance, ready to dodge or evade anything that could come his way. You should try and think of another possibility, Yawatch, because the one you just mentioned is quite the nonsense. I would never join you. Giving him a studying gaze, Yawatch went quiet for a moment. Then the black of his cloak grew even blacker and a living darkness manifested at its hems. Ichigo immediately brought one of his legs a bit further to the back, so he could spring into action even faster, and returned the Quincy King's gaze. Even if I threatened you with killing everyone in Soul Society? Or, if I told you I would spare everyone? Or, if I brought the one dearest to you back from death? Even then you would choose the path of perpetual torment, damning your soul to suffer eternally, a fate only I can bring you? Ichigo knew that it would come. That Yawatch would try and tempt him by mentioning his mother. He knew it, yet he still couldn't hold himself back. In a fluid flash, gliding across the battlefield, he landed right in front of Yawatch with his Zanpakuto descending upon the god, an image of a deicide. Yawatch reached into his cloak and pulled out a magnificent ornate sword in time to parry Ichigo's strike with just one hand. It didn't even budge him. I'll take that as a definitive no, Ichigo. Good. A wild, borderline maniacal grin formed on Yawatch's face as he pushed Ichigo away and reached with his second hand for the teen's exposed throat. Not expecting it, Ichigo reacted instinctively and released a burst of black flames. Without any care, Yawatch ignored them and his fingers closed around Ichigo's neck like an iron claw. Shocked, Ichigo saw the same flames burst out of Yawatch's hand as they licked his neck. Both Ichigo and Yawatch looked at each other. It seems the reports were true. Our powers cancel each other out. Interesting. Also, preposterous. Squeezing the teen's neck, Yawatch brought Ichigo's face closer to him before hurling the helpless teen through air like a wooden doll. The god was strong. Ichigo crashed through several concrete walls, each hit gradually slowing his speed down, until he finally managed to flip himself and land on his feet. He looked up, to see Yawatch several dozen meters away from him, only to vanish and then appear right above him. He pumped Ryuryoku into his legs and flashed elsewhere, away from constraining battlefield and onto open space. He could feel Yawatch on the back of his neck and so he spun around while exclaiming, Yami no Tsukitate! A wall of densely knitted flames formed just an inch in front of him, stopping Yawatch dead in his tracks. His hand, still reaching for Ichigo's neck, hovered in air with the tips of its fingers slightly touching the shield of flames. To the god's great annoyance, he seemed to have been unable to penetrate it. I see. You are not using them as a simple tool, you incorporated them in your own Zanpakuto instead. Sickening, Ichigo. Truly, an abhorrent sight. Yawatch stated and, after cocking his hand back, smashed through the shield with pure, raw power. At that point, though, Ichigo had already backed further away. So, my powers are not completely useless. In that case. Anjutsu no Ka. Ichigo shouted in mid-slash and released a potent torrent of thick flames straight at Yawatch's face. The attack surprisingly hit the mark, though Ichigo somehow knew Yawatch just let it happen. As the fiery energy slowly dissipated from Yawatch, Ichigo heard the Quincy King grunt incoherently. With narrowed eyes, he took a thoughtful step back. Yawatch was bound to do a quick and hasty retaliation, of that Ichigo was quite sure. He wasn't wrong. Once the remnants of his ability died down, Ichigo saw and felt black energy, an energy that had the same texture as his black flames, bursting into existence with Yhwach serving as the epicenter. A blanket of protection, the energy washed over the Quincy King and, for a short while, hid his face from Ichigo's gaze. There was a small detail that did not escape the teen's careful eye. One side of Yhwach's mustache looked fairly burnt. "You became more powerful than I have expected, Ichigo. That is truly unfortunate." Yhwach's voice boomed over the battlefield akin to a thunder, bringing a wave of Ryatsu on the whole scene. Ichigo clenched his jaw, but he managed to remain standing up straight. "You think?" Above Yhwach, a large bright line of energy formed without a warning and shot down a human-sized rapier arrow. His hand wrapped its fingers around it, an action that caused the arrow to slightly change its shape, making it look like a large broadsword. "Yes, it is unfortunate, as now I have no other choice than to subdue you with overwhelming force. I had intended to take you back with me and re-educate you at a more gradual pace, but it seems there will be no time for that," Yhwach said, his words starting a few seconds of total silence. Ichigo was ready. At the first sign of a change in the air, he plunged to the side as fast as he could and, with gritted teeth, watched Yhwach's rapier broadsword slash the air in an arc so wide, he could feel the stirred air tickling his cheek. "That thing. I can't let myself get his with it," Ichigo thought, and immediately channeled enough Ryuryoku into his somewhat free hand. When he felt his enemy approaching him, he hastily pointed one finger in his general direction. "Bakudo number 1. Sigh." Ignoring the pain from overloaded Kido, he sprang towards Yhwach. Well aware that his Kido was the lowest one he could choose, he wasted no time. He didn't expect the spell to actually work properly on an enemy of this caliber, but he didn't care. The only thing he wanted from it was a distraction. As expected, the spell managed to just slightly move Yhwach's hands, but it bought Ichigo enough time to close the distance and bring his sword down on the Quincy King in a diagonal arch, putting all of his weight behind the strike. Ichigo felt his Zanpakuto sink a little into something soft. With wide eyes, he quickly realized it was Yhwach's forearm. His Zanpakuto managed to cut through a web-like pattern on the man's skin, but it went no further than that. Still, it was enough to draw blood. However, he wasn't allowed to celebrate his victory for much longer as Yhwach's second hand came crashing down on his face and blasted him away. "Well, that was unexpected. I did not think you could damage my blood. It seems marking you as a special war power was well deserved. I really should stop underestimating you in any way." Ichigo heard only half of the words, as he intently tried to clear his head. The punch to the face almost cracked his bones and left him with ringing ears and double vision. He tottered and violently shook his head. After a scream rang in his mind, he mindlessly threw himself to the ground and by sheer luck avoided getting decapitated. Slowly getting his vision under control, he instantly brought up his Zanpakuto and managed to parry a powerful blow that rattled the bones in both his forearms. It seemed Yhwach was a powerhouse even in the strength department. "I fought Kenpachi, I fought Anohana-san, I even briefly fought the old man himself. None of them had this amount of ridiculous strength. This is like 3 or 4 copies of Kenpachi hitting me at the same time." He thought and felt his knees shake under the immense pressure. Shifting his Zanpakuto, he let Yhwach's rapier broadsword slide along the blade and hit the ground next to him. Debris from the ground obscured both his and Yhwach's vision. Sharp pain in his left thigh prevented him from flashing away and he was forced to try and block another of Yhwach's strikes. Doing just that, he found himself skidding across the battlefield. He noticed around half a dozen tiny arrows of rapier protruding from his pained leg. The wounds were tiny, but they hurt like hell, and the longer the arrows stayed in his body the worse the pain became. He yanked them out with a flick of wrist and released a content sigh. Now this is what it should have been from the beginning. Me pushing and you losing your breath, Ichigo? Shit. He parried another slash, but it seemed like the rapier broadsword's reach didn't correspond with its mass and Ichigo felt a sharp edge cutting into his calf. A ribbon of blood leaked from the wound and turned the lower part of his clothes a bit wet. "I can't concentrate enough to keep my own blood active and it seems like my natural defenses are not enough." He mentally whined and bit the inside of his mouth. Yawatch was closing on him again and Ichigo tightened the grip on his Zanpakuto. Just when he was about to parry the Quincy King's strike, he released a fair amount of his Ryuryoku. Getsuga Tensho. The brilliant crescent wave of energy pushed against Yawatch's sword with incredible pressure and, after a brief struggle, it exploded and violently pushed the man away. It's ironic. Despite his obvious strength, he isn't that good in a combat. Yet, despite that, he feels overwhelming. Even when I fought Aizen, I somehow kept a tiny spark of hope that was whispering me, you can win. Against this guy? His presence alone is so suffocating, so unbearable, I don't think I can win like this. I can somewhat fight him, hold my own for the moment, but that's all. It feels so damn hopeless. With a barely audible growl, Ichigo gathered his strength and followed after Yawatch with the sword on the ready. Even if he felt what he did, he wasn't just going to lie down on the job and let others deal with it. He could sense his enemy had already recovered from his previous strike and so he quickly changed the trajectory of his Shuunpa and swung his Zanpakuto with all of his strength. Screeching loudly, his blade met Yawatch's sword in a firework of sparks. However, he felt the minuscule movement of his enemy's blade and slightly raised one eyebrow. In return, Yawatch did the same, clearly not expecting Ichigo to push him to this extent. In an impressive burst of raw strength, the Quincy King retaliated and hurled Ichigo away with a hefty shove. Ichigo didn't even need the ability to see the future to know what was coming next. Briefly leaving his body sail through the air, he focused all of his concentration on his Ryuryoku control and let it flow into his own blood. Once he crash-landed and got back on his feet, he spotted a massive rapier arrow closing in on him and knew he had no time to dodge. But he had expected it. With a web-like pattern forming all over his skin, he raised his Zanpakuto and, using it as a shield, he took the stand. The arrow hit him unlike anything before. The force behind it was not comparable with any strike he had blocked so far. His feet dug into the dirt and his elbows bent a bit, but still, he managed to hold his own. The ground below and around him caved in and formed a crater of a cracked stone. Still, he withstood it all. Then the arrow lost its structural integrity and blew up. I honestly thought it could end this pointless fight, but Yawatch spoke only to stop with his mouth open in surprise when the dust from the explosion cleared up and he saw Ichigo still standing. The Quincy King narrowed his eyes, but there was a hint of a grin hidden beneath his mustache. Ah, Blut. You already mastered it to this extent. Truly, your latent ability to grow in power, your potential, cannot be matched by any and none. Breathing slowly and deeply, Ichigo let his body and his Ryuryoku take care of the multitude of lesser injuries covering him from head to toe and stared at Yawatch with a hard gaze. While he had managed to withstand the powerful attack without any serious wounds, it still shook him up. For the first time since his fight with Ulquiorra, he had felt fear. He got afraid that maybe, just maybe, he would get blown to the smithereens. He got afraid that he couldn't do what he had promised to do. The unreasonable, unconscious and irrational feeling that one can't defy almost paralyzed him from within like a snake writhing in danger. It was terrible, a horrifying experience that helped him understand just what kind of opponent he faced right now. What kind of mind-boggling creature his enemy was. It was only in that last moment of defiance he had realized it. Months ago, he had faced Aizen, who had claimed to be a god. Now, he was facing the real deal. He was facing the god. Alone and isolated, the Soul King listened to the echoes of the void, growing weaker with every passing second. There was only one thing he could think about. Fratricide. An especially strong echo reverberated in his head like a gong. It woke him up from his bodily slumber and made him feel just a tiny fragment of human emotion lesser beings called a worry. The fate of the entire world depended on one person and one person only. On one young man, practically still a teen, with the power to bring the world to destruction, if he ever thought of it. The young man felt panic. The Soul King wanted to help him, to ease his worries and to push him through the ordeal, but he couldn't. Not even he was omnipotent. Not anymore. Therefore, there was only one thing he could do, and he did it immediately. He prayed. Flashing images. Thoughts and memories. Bright pictures on a non-existent canvas within the mind that only he possessed.
An overwhelming darkness trying to swallow them.
A flood of grief and anxiety whirling in a vortex of his emotions that he couldn't control. They paralyzed him, made him weak, forced their unreasonable conditions on his fragile consciousness and turned him from a warrior to a simple teen that was still unable to forget that one rainy night when he couldn't protect the one person he loved the most. It was like standing in a hurricane of bullets, his body bare and unprotected from the pain coming at him from every direction.
He couldn't control it.
The dark wave washed over him with a monstrous reach, grasping him under his neck like a god of revenge, whispering hateful words into his ear, putting them in his own mouth.
He couldn't control it.
It was like trying to escape the quicksand, only it wasn't the sand eating him, it was something much, much worse. If he let himself get eaten, he would never be able to return from the darkness.
He couldn't control it. Or could he?
Images of his loved ones, the ones he cared, glowed in warm light. A memory of his mother's smile, a memory of his sister's smiles. When his life was simple and full of happiness. His first kiss with Yoruchi. The tender but not so gentle touch of a grinning healer.
The smile of a small Arankar as she quietly slept on his chest. Yes, Mama loves you too, sweetie. Ichi-nii is the best. I love you, Ichigo.
Like a raging fire, the bright light blew away the darkness and turned the canvas blank, yet warm.
He was scared. But it was all right.
Renewed determination filled his veins like electricity, filling him to the brim with its shocking power. His fingers wrapping around the hilt of his Zanpakuto, Ichigo shook off the dizziness and shot towards Yhwach with Ryuryoko blazing around him. Yhwach flared his spiritual energy as well and the two torrents of black fire met in a thunderous noise not even a second later. Completely ignoring the possibility of getting burned, Ichigo angrily crossed the flames and cut through the smoke in one fell swoop. With his blood reaching a boiling point, he came face to face with Yhwach and brought his Zanpakuto down on the man. God or no God, he had to fight. His inner spirit always told him to abandon his fears and only to look forward. Even though he currently found himself unable to do the former, he could definitely do the latter. A parry later, the teen saw Yhwach's free hand forming a fist and flying straight at his face. It was the second time his opponent did it and so now he was prepared. Fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, Yhwach. His Ryuryoko ready, he uttered the word.
Bakuto number 8. Seiki.
An orb of bluish energy formed in his left open hand as he moved it against Yhwach's fist. It burst at the contact but it worked as intended and successfully repelled the attacking hand. Using that minuscule window of opportunity, Ichigo spun around and slashed at his opponent one more time.
Blood vene anhaben.
At first, Ichigo did not understand what happened. When his sword almost collided with Yhwach, he thought he had him. But in the last moment, just before his blade could nick the man's clothes and body, he heard a clang and his Zanpakuto stopped moving. Even though he was still trying to push it in, he couldn't move it an inch. Slowly, something translucent came into existence, encapsulating Yhwach like a shield and blocking his blade from touching the man. Narrowing his eyes, he withdrew his sword to strike again when he realized the translucent thing started to grow. When it came in contact with the skin of his hand, he jerked in pain and hastily backed away. It felt like he tried to suck out the Ryuryoku from my body. He thought and, looking at Yhwach, gulped. He noticed a web-like pattern covering the whole translucent barrier. You managed to learn how to use blood, Ichigo, but if I had to guess, it was instinctual.
However, I am the father of all Quincy. I can do things with Reisher and Ryuryoku you wouldn't even dream of.
Yhwach stated and let the barrier gradually dissipate, as if taunting Ichigo to try and come at him again.
Ichigo didn't want to disappoint him and did just that. Leaping in the air, right above Yhwach, he slashed down while expelling tremendous amount of Ryuryoku. Getsuga Tensho.
However, against Ichigo's expectations, Yhwach did not respond with his translucent barrier. Instead, he let his own black energy burst out of him and used it as a sort of a cushion that slowed and weakened Ichigo's Getsuga to the point where he could repel it with just his Reisher broadsword. I think we both know you can't win this fight, Ichigo. So, a question arises. Why would you continue with this charade? Ichigo heard Yhwach ask once he landed on his feet.
you think this is a game?
The teen asked, slightly disgruntled.
Oh, no. I certainly do think you are trying hard, but, Ichigo, do you take me for a fool?
If you truly wanted to fight me with every intention of killing me, you would have released the final stage of your Zanpakuto a long time ago. Ichigo felt a slight knot tying itself within his stomach. His mouth dried and he licked his lips.
What makes you think I won't do it? Bankai is a last resort a Shinigami uses when there is no other way. Yhwach grinned. So very different from the past when you used to use your Bankai every time you got a serious fight.
People don't change that fast, Ichigo.
You are offending my intelligence. Believing your words would make you sound arrogant and plain stupid. To challenge me without using your full power? I don't think so.
Ichigo reflexively took a step backwards and tried not to look away. The knot in his stomach grew larger.
You think I don't see your true objective? You think I can't sense Aizen's Ryatsu, so carefully hidden with numerous seals? No, Ichigo.
For some reason, you are trying to deny me access to Aizen's body. It's almost as if you knew what I intended to do with him. As if you and your friends were preparing some sort of a trap for me. A lower eyelid of Ichigo's left eye twitched without his consent, but he didn't respond to Yhwach's words. He didn't believe his own voice wouldn't betray his emotions.
In return, Yhwach's grin widened. Ah, so it is like that. I'm afraid your actions were pointless. There is nothing that can stop what's coming, Ichigo. No petty or elaborate trap can prevent the inevitable. Ichigo tightened the grip on his Zanpakuto.
Then Yhwach's grin vanished.
I enjoyed our spar, but it's enough. It's time for me to move on.
Expecting a sudden strike, Ichigo instantly flashed away from his last position only to realize there was no strike coming. Looking back at Yhwach, he saw the Quincy King standing still with a calm expression on his face.
What is that?
Ichigo thought when he noticed tiny columns of bright light emanating from Yhwach's hand that the man turned towards the sky.
Ichigo, I'm sure you have heard about it.
About what happened all those years ago, during a certain rainy night. Coldstone glare formed on the teen's face, but Yhwach continued as the columns of light in the palm of his hand grew larger.
Swollen.
The holy selection in which I can take the power I had previously distributed to my Quincy.
It is time for it again.
It is time for my original, true power, to return.
Don't blink for a second, Ichigo.
Before the light completely consumed Yhwach, Ichigo managed to send another Getsuga at him, but the ability just dissipated at the point of contact without doing anything. The column of light shot up towards the sky, where it split into numerous smaller columns that dashed towards different locations all over Siriidii. Ichigo couldn't see where they went or what happened once they reached their destinations, but he knew it couldn't be something good. Then, after a while, he felt the spiritual energy around Yhwach to grow to unnatural, grotesque proportions.
Getting goosebumps, Ichigo swallowed.
Then the light died down before he realized it. There, Yhwach stood, looking no different than before.
Ichigo, it's been fun. Now, I will not kill you.
I want you to witness the end of this world with your own eyes. I want you to witness the birth of the new one and see just how wrong you were in your defiance. When Yhwach slowly raised one arm and pointed his hand towards him, Ichigo narrowed his eyes and raised his Zanpakuto to act fast. Before he realized it though, incredible pain almost tore his mind to pieces.
Wah!
His vision tilted and he found himself falling on the ground. Shocked to the very core from pain, he could see his own arms and legs, torn to pieces, falling down next to him, no longer attached to his body.
Arg. Farewell, Ichigo.
A long shot away from his previous battlefield, where he could no longer hear wailing of his defeated opponent, Yhwach looked at a person firmly held against his will in a containment tube. That person was a former captain of the 5th Division, Aizen Sasuke. He was still alive and conscious, but the many seals covering his whole body prevented him from taking any action. Yhwach slightly shook his head in grimace.
Well, what do you know?
They really did quite well in stopping you. He muttered and raised his right hand.
In an instant several seals came undone, allowing Aizen to open his mouth.
Foolish as he is, Kurosaki Ichigo is the real thing. Even after everything I came through, I still cannot best him. The former captain said with a clear distaste in his mouth.
A wave of a hand later, another seal vanished. Yes, he is an amusing child.
Powerful but still a child.
Well, you both are in my eyes.
Aizen squinted his eyes at the man and ignored his word.
I'm quite surprised that no even the Hogyoku could help me and make me his equal.
It is, after all, based after the, well, I don't want to completely destroy the taste in my mouth, so I will not speak him name.
Yhwach's hand stopped moving as his gaze gained intensity that made Aizen suddenly wary.
Some of the seals were still in place and, while he could get rid of them on his own now, it would still take him some time. Therefore, he was still unable to move properly. When he saw Yhwach's hand reaching for his chest, he stiffened.
Your precious little Hogyoku, huh?
That tiny little jewel full of miracles.
I wonder, is it making you immortal just like that, or is it because you are tapping into his power?
I wonder, what would happen if I took it for myself?
Would it make killing him easier?
Yhwach said very slowly, as if enjoying every single word that caused Aizen's eyes to whiten more than before. Then Aizen realized his intentions, but he was powerless from stopping him. When Yhwach's fingers sank into his body, he looked at him one last time.
Father?
Yhwach snorted and then returned his gaze. You have served me well, my bastard son. Despite not inheriting the Quincy blood, you still managed to get close in becoming the thing that could deliver me the Soul King. You created the Hogyoku, and for that, I am grateful.
You will become the last founding stone in my new world.
A blinding light erupted from Aizen's body and a blood-curdling scream crawled from the depths of his being when Yhwach forcibly reached into his soul and dragged out from him the energy that served as the Hogyoku. Crushing it in his hand, Yhwach reached for its energy and sucked it out into his own body. A tiny ribbon of murky energy shot out from his body as if reacting to the Hogyoku, causing the Quincy King a small bit of discomfort. The energy vanished before he could even register it with his own eyes. I don't know what you did, but it clearly didn't work. I can feel the cursed Hogyoku within me.
Thank you, my son, fathered in darkness. At that moment, Aizen's body limply hit the ground, devoid of any energy, or devoid of any light.
Giving it one last look, Yhwach then turned to the sky and vanished in a brilliant light. The only thing that remained after him was the dead body of Aizen Sasuke.
The immortal false god was no more.
That wraps up this part of What If Ichigo Awoke His True Powers.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned.
Quick reminder.
What If Ichigo Awoke His True Powers will be finished soon, since we've nearly at the end of the story. So now, I need your help picking the next project for the channel.
I'm currently deciding between these 3 fanfics.
What if Gacha system in Modern Family World? What if Transmigrated in Bleach World? What if Transmigrated in One Piece and becoming a Marine?
Please vote in the poll and let me know which story you'd like to see next.
I'll take the top pick and start working on that series next. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.